I am absolutely thrilled and thrilled for all of you because we have Ari Fleischer here as our next guest. It's been and it's great to have you here, and it's we're in an incredible time. I can't remember whether it was Avril Harriman or John Foster Dulles that said, "You can't make this shit up."
That was the technical version.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, how are you looking at this thing right now as we stand today?
Well, I mean, why would anybody expect 2020 to end on any other note than this? And of course, we've got another 7 weeks left, maybe of this, but certainly of 2020. Yeah, I mean, who could have guessed this would go like this? And I lived through one recount in 2000, and now it looks like we're going to have. I don't think it's going to go as long here in 2020, but it certainly is messy.
Back to that. I mean, you lived through the 2020. You're right dead center of that, of the 2000. I mean, right there. Compare and contrast the two. I mean, 2020 to 2000.
Well, the two biggest differences are, number one, the 2020 election is not as close as the 2000 election. The 2000 election in Florida was some 500 votes. There is no state right now that is anywhere near that close in 2020. There are 5 divided, disputed states, uncalled states, but in every one of those states, the margin is significantly bigger, at least right now. The other difference is we were a nicer nation in 2000. Whatever disputes we had, as divided as that era seemed at the time, that was a pleasant era. Yeah. And Gore v. Bush, nothing in terms of the personalities compared with Donald Trump. So very different time, very different nation.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that same thing, just before. Like, I remember how gentlemanly they were and sort of tamping emotions down versus trying to sort of inflame them. And that seems to be the situation we're in today. Kind of we work just on this extreme of trying to get everybody agitated. That's like the best way to do politics today.
But the funny thing about it was we went to court just as President Trump was going to court. We just went to court politely. President Trump throws everything at you when he goes to court. But don't misinterpret that. Both sides play tough. President Trump is playing tough. We played tough. Gore played tough in court too. When the presidency's on the line, you play tough.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think the impact on? I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here, but the polls, for instance, were so far off. You had Biden's going to win by 17%. I certainly believed it. He's going to win by 11%. You had a guy who's pretty divisive out there. Is in a weird way, did that tamp down, maybe suppress votes that came out? I mean, you hear that, and then you wonder what's the future of polling, which is something, when I was a kid, that was scientifically, that was an exactitude. The polls were pretty accurate.
Yeah, here's some of the numbers for you. The average on the Real Clear Politics average on the final poll was Biden was going to win by 7.2 percentage points. Right now, he's up by about 2.5 percentage points. When all the outstanding votes come in on the West Coast, Biden's probably going to win by about 3 points, maybe just a decimal or two north of 3. Right. And so the polls were off by a magnitude of 100%. If you look at 7.2 versus, call it 3.6. The Economist, popular magazine, they had Biden winning in their final poll by 10. Quinnipiac, Biden winning by 11. NBC News, Biden winning by 10. So it's all pretty bad. And a couple of them were a little bit closer. But then you go to the state polls and you can see a similar pattern. And that was particularly the case in Senate races. People thought Olympia Snowe, Susan Collins in Maine was a dead duck.
Yeah.
And she won by 8 or 9 points. I could go on and on about the polling errors, and it's 2 cycles in a row, actually 3 cycles in a row if you include President Trump in 2016.
What do you make of that for the future? What's the long-term effect of having, polls that are you can't trust? And then I guess the caveat to this is it the people you can't trust or the pollsters? Who's zooming who in that game?
I don't make the allegation that there's malice here.
Yeah.
I just think that we are a nation that has changed its behavior and how people talk to pollsters, particularly for conservatives and for Republicans. Look, when you go around calling half the country pejorative, worst kind of names if you supported President Trump, and then you call somebody on the phone and you say to them, do you support President Trump? There are going to be people who aren't going to tell you because they don't want to go through what they think they're going to have to go through to defend who they are and what they believe.
Yeah.
And that was a classic theory about the shy Trump voter, which I think there's some merit to that. They just didn't want to say. So the polling model has been broken in this era. And again, I don't think it's because the pollsters are trying to deceive anybody. They have no interest in getting it wrong. They look bad when they have it wrong, but they just don't seem to learn from their mistakes. And that's what I find trouble.
Well, in the whole idea of not learning from mistakes, I find that interesting that you said that, because there seems to be a lesson somewhere in here for politicians. You look back at Obama, and at the end, you know, everyone loved him in the country. He did for a plurality of people, but you know, sort of governed by fiat at the end. Didn't get a lot of bipartisan support on stuff. And you see Trump doing the same thing, not looking to get a bipartisan support. And I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, somebody would get elected and they would sort of move to the middle maybe more, or, you know, you don't see that now in terms of getting things done.
No, because the electoral advantages all come from the polls these days. And frankly, television coverage and media coverage come from the polls. If you're a politician, what do you want more than anything else? And that's, you want attention. You want to be on TV. You want to be seen. You want to be heard. If you say something moderate, reasonable, sensible, cite data, you're not going to get booked on Fox or CNN or MSNBC. If, on the other hand, you accuse your opponent of the worst kinds of things and you have a really great, negative, nasty soundbite, yeah, you're going to probably get yourself booked on one of these TV shows. So the rewards and the incentives no longer seem to favor legislating. Now, I've got to say, I think that's about to change as a result of this election, particularly if Joe Biden wins the presidency. And that's because what's about to happen with a shrunken majority in the House for the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi, which we should come back to.
Yeah.
The Republicans highly likely to keep the Senate. And then with Joe Biden having won the presidency, if that happens, Mitch McConnell, an old style backroom deal maker, is going to rule the roost. It really won't matter what the House passes. It won't matter what Joe Biden calls for. If Mitch McConnell decides it's going nowhere in the Senate, nowhere in the Senate.
But Joe knows him, right? Because they worked together at some point. Joe was in the Senate for a long time. You would think he's maybe understands he's got to make a deal.
And that's my point about why it's different from President Obama. President Obama was much less interested in the wheeling and the dealing and the getting involved with the Senate and cutting the negotiations and cutting the deals the old-fashioned way. It sort of fell out of favor. Fell out of favor with a lot of Republicans. The Tea Party rose up and said, every time you scratch my back and I scratch yours, the deficit goes up. And so there were a lot of objections in the era 5 to 15 years ago about a lot of these backroom way Washington has historically worked, where compromise and deal making ended up carrying the day towards something toward the center. I'll give you an example. Let's just say again, Biden wins and Republicans control the Senate and you have judicial vacancies. In the old days, what would happen is the president would go to the Senate majority leader and say, we've got 5 vacancies. You put through 3 of mine. You give me the name of 2 judges. I'll nominate them. You put through the package of 5. That's the way it always worked until about 10 to 15 years ago, when the parties start to filibuster each other's nominations and nominations sat vacant. I remember that happening under George W. Bush. We sent up all kinds of nominations to the Senate, and Senator Harry Reid led filibuster over all of them. The Court of Appeals sat vacant. I think Biden and McConnell are going to go back to a little bit more of that, and that's got an impact on legislation as well, not just nominations.
You know, it's all this, noise on the right and left is leaving out the center. You could see, just anecdotally, a lot of Biden votes go to people who don't like Trump more than they love the policies that they're voting for. You sort of see that. And the same with people for Trump. They like the policy, they don't like the guy. So it's a weird mix.
Yeah, and elections are always weird mixes. Some people vote on the basis of personality. Some people vote on the basis of policy. Some people vote on the basis of mixing those two together. It's just that this cycle, it's weirder.
Yeah. And
everything is more amped up. Everything is more hyped. And President Trump is a bull in a china shop. And everywhere he goes, he brings another china shop with him. So it's been a lot of heat and a lot of hot rhetoric, which at the end of the day, I think if the president ran without COVID, if there was never COVID, he'd have won comfortably.
Right.
I think even with COVID, if the president hadn't been so hot to handle, if he had only toned himself down personally a notch or three, he likely would have won.
Can't do that though.
No, that's right. That's
He's
not
just
him.
not able to do that. But look, people are in our business, they're really concerned about taxes. There's a socialist tinge to what goes on the left these days. And, we're right in the middle of capital gains taxes on people making 400,000, stepped up cost basis. So if you have a business or something you want to pass, or a house or something you want to pass on to your kids, you're not going to be able to do it. Inheritance taxes. I mean, there's some, seriously aggressively anti-capitalist kind of things going on the other side. And I think everyone kind of feels, well, Biden won't do that, but who knows?
Well, even if Biden wanted to do that now, he's not going to be able to. Here's what's happening in the House of Representatives. Prior to Election Day, the House was 232 to 197, the Democrats. By the time this is done, it's probably going to be much closer to 225 to 210.
Wow.
The Republicans are going to gain between 10 and 15 seats in the House. So if the Democrats have 225 seat majority, that means a majority of 7. It is the smallest Democratic majority in the House since the New Deal.
Wow.
Which basically makes it largely ungovernable for Nancy Pelosi. It's going to be very hard for her to cobble together 218 votes. Now, the group that remains that's going to give the Democrats that now shrunken down 225 or so, it's going to be largely liberal, progressive. The few moderates and ticket splitter conservatives in the House Democratic caucus are almost all gone. But it's going to be very hard still with a 7-vote majority for them to pass even a liberal or a progressive agenda. It's just too small a majority historically for a fractious Democratic House. And I think Nancy Pelosi is smart enough to recognize there's only so far left she wants to pass things, because she knows that means the Democrats could lose the gavel, particularly if Biden wins. The first year of a presidency, the first midterm election, is historically throw the bums out in the president's party election. So again, that puts Mitch McConnell back in the catbird seat of saying, well, if you pass that, it's going nowhere in the Senate. If you want action in the Senate, we're all going to have to meet in the middle. Well, that's why I think there's going to be a return to more of a normalcy. And for taxes and for a lot of the issues that you and your investors care about the most, we're no longer playing in the polls. Now we're playing between the 40-yard lines instead of between the 15s or the 10-yard lines. Massive difference. No more worrying about a wealth tax. No more worrying about giant changes in estate taxes. No more worries about a lot of the fundamental progressive pushes, certainly trillion-dollar tax increases, not going to happen.
Right. And, typically the economy does best when there's a Democrat president and a Republican Senate. That seems to be the mix that's, and I think you want to hope that this is purposeful with people because they want compromise. They want to go somewhere in between.
Well, and plus, I think one of the reasons the market's reacted as it has since Tuesday is because you're now going to be able to lock in the policy changes that President Trump made, particularly the 2017 Tax Reform Act with the lower corporate rates, the lower individual income tax rates, et cetera. That's now law of the land. It's going to be very hard to undo it. And so what you really have is stability, and then the possibilities of change are going to be much more moderated changes.
Yeah. When you look at how this, because I sort of agree with what you're saying, and you're looking at this on a timeline. It was tough during first Bush administration too, but then you had the Tea Party and all this stuff came and sort of reactionary stuff with Trump. Have people had enough of it, you think? Or is that part of the anti-Trump vote to say, let's calm down? What do you think it is?
That remains to be seen, because I think what's happening inside the Republican Party, unlike the Democratic Party, Republican Party right now has a fracture between the insiders and the outsiders, the establishment and the populists. In the Democratic Party, it's much more of an ideological split, a split between the socialist wing of the Democratic Party, AOC, et cetera, and a liberal wing. There really, again, is no more of a moderate conservative wing in Congress, at least for the Democrats, and actually out in the countryside, it's quite small as well now. So you have an ideological split in the Democrat side about how far do you go for the Green New Deal? How far do you raise taxes, et cetera? Republicans, it's much more insider outsider. And Republicans are shifting from a party that was college educated to a party that is increasingly blue collar and working class and high school educated. Now, it's not there yet, but it's a shift that we're watching, and it's been the case for the last 3 election cycles. That is why trade deals haven't been getting done. It used to be that the Democrats, President Clinton, would propose trade deals. Most Democrats would oppose them, and Republicans would deliver the votes for NAFTA, for example. Now, neither party has a wing in it that is for free trade. That's because Republicans have changed to a party that much more representative of blue collar working people.
Is that
fascinating changes?
Is that a values-based transformation? I mean, is it now a party based on, we don't share the same economic status, but do we share values? I mean, what's the hope?
Great question. I think it's values. I think it's culture. I think it's geography. I think as more and more the Republican vote comes from rural areas and ex-urban areas, and we're not doing as well in suburbia. That's part of it. Part of it too, though, is the unique nature of President Trump. One of the reasons that Republicans have lost a lot of college-educated voters, particularly college-educated women voters, is because the president's tweets, the president's going too far on a variety of matters. And that's alienated a lot of voters. But here's another thing, and this is a less economic thing, but it's a political thing, but it's so important to the future of the Republican Party, and it's one of the potential changes in American politics. The black vote.
Yeah.
John McCain got 4% of the black vote when he ran in 2008. Mitt Romney got 6%. Donald Trump, when he ran the first time, got 8%. He doubled what McCain got. Tuesday, Donald Trump got 12% of the black vote. He tripled what John McCain got and doubled what Mitt Romney got. That is essential to the future of the Republican Party. They have to grow in the minority community. The Hispanic vote, John McCain got 31%. Mitt Romney got 27%. Donald Trump got 28% the first time. Donald Trump got 32% of the Hispanic vote, 5 points more than Mitt Romney did on Tuesday night. Again, essential to the Republicans that they recognize the demographic changes underway in America.
Well, if it's a values-based change, then that makes sense, because you have church-going people, you've got Catholics, you've got, and they sort of align on a values base of what, supposed to be the leader of the Republican Party is supposed to be about anyway. And it's just interesting, to see that that is a natural progression of that.
Yeah, and it's values, and also in part because just as President Trump has led the direction that helped Republicans lose college-educated voters, Democrats have been losing these values-based voters. I mean, there's one of the reasons the Hispanic community in this election, particularly in the battleground states of Florida, Miami-Dade County, where Hillary won by 30 points and Donald Trump just won by some 5 points. Massive swing in Miami-Dade County. That's values-based. That is not economic-based. People are not voting for their pocketbook on these matters. This is about values. Particularly, it's a reaction to the socialist wing of the Democrat Party that scared a lot of people who have fled socialism to come to this country.
Yeah, I mean, socialism has some bad lessons to teach. To just about anybody. Obviously, the concern with taxes is something that everyone pretty much on this Zoom, the thousands of people that are listening, they're all talking to their clients every day. But even with that, people have decided I'm going to vote Democratic, even though I know that's sort of a vote for some kind of socialism or some kind of social, or even though in my own interest is to keep taxes low. And nobody could have foreseen this. When you were making that vote for partial socialism or whatever it might be, we were assuming Biden was going to win.
And I think that's why keeping the Senate is so important for Republicans, because that's the check on extremism. If the Democrats had gained seats in the House the way it was projected, and if the Democrats had taken over the Senate the way the pollsters projected it, and Joe Biden won, markets would be very different right now. And a lot of the legitimate fears about how far will they go? Can Joe Biden restrain how far they'll go? Will he veto what they pass? Would be relevant questions. But that's why I think there's a sweet feeling among many people right now that regardless of what happens in the White House, because the Democrats didn't gain in the House, Republicans keep in the Senate, there's a stability in effect. And that's what my point about taxes.
Yeah.
The 2017
And also,
Tax Act remains safe.
what about the other thing I had been reading on the local level? The Republicans had done very well. So on the local state legislative level and the governor's level, I mean, and during a year of redistricting, that seems like a big deal too.
Republicans picked up one governorship, so right now that would make it 28-22 among the governors. And Republicans kept all the legislative seats. The Democrats thought they could flip Texas. They thought they could make huge inroads in Florida. None of that happened. Republicans kept both. Republicans actually took over the state house in New Hampshire. And you're right, when you do it in a year that ends in a 0, you're doing it in a year that's going to impact redistricting. That'll play out in 2022. The other interesting thing about redistricting for the 2024 presidential election is California is going to lose votes, New York is going to lose votes. They're going to shift more to Florida, Texas. Arizona will gain seats. Arizona has become a jump ball in politics. It used to be Republican safe state, and now it is an absolute swing state. Democrats may win Arizona and have 2 Senate seats in Arizona. Unheard of.
How much of that is due to how much McCain didn't like the Trump family, the Trump back and forth? I mean, they could have helped him a little bit there. You would think with the margin being so low, a McCain boost maybe would have done it.
Yeah, I think the changes are deeper. I think it's demographic changes in Arizona. Certainly, it's a lot of people from California who are moving out. It helped Joe Biden, and it helped Mark Kelly in Arizona, the Senate candidate who beat Martha McSally. Certainly having the McCain endorsement there helped, but I don't think that was determinative.
No, I was just curious.
Endorsements don't really move the needle that much.
All right. The last question, we only have a couple more minutes here, is on this legal stuff. You've been in the middle of that. We talked about it at the beginning. How do you see it playing out? What's sort of the scenario you think we're going to follow here? And, just when will we have some closure? I know that's I'm asking you to guess.
Yeah, I think there's 2 phases to the legal. The first phase is a relatively innocuous phase, and that's where we're in right now. The challenges that the Trump team is making to the results right now are much more procedural issues. We want to have observers in watching the ballots be opened. Unlike 2000, where we went right to the core of voting, and by a 7-2 vote, the Supreme Court agreed with the Bush campaign that the manner in which Florida was counting ballots violated the Due Process Clause of the Constitution. Then the remedy was a 5-4 vote, which said stop the count, George Bush wins. The Trump people have not yet gone right after the count. They've gone after the process. So right now, it's pretty innocuous stuff. It'd be helpful to have observers in there from both parties. That's the way it should be, absolutely. But again, unless these votes are 500 vote difference, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 vote difference, it's really hard to swing a change in the courts legally. So the issue that could spook markets is if the Trump campaign turns it up a few notches and does start to go after the absolute core of how the votes are being cast, and a judge agrees, and votes that were previously cast are thrown out. That starts to make you question, will we ever know the results in that state? And that starts to create doubt. So right now there's enough certainty. I don't rule out, though, that this could spin off into fundamental mayhem and actual votes are cast, challenged, and a court agrees. And that's uncharted territory in this number of states.
Well, in this country, I mean, right? I mean, it's that is what should scare everybody, I guess. What is that?
Don't rule it out, because President Trump will play for keeps. Yeah. He will go after the vote if he thinks he has a shot.
Well, I guess we're going to have to leave it on that note. I appreciate your time. It was great for you to be here with us, and really helpful to sort of get things in perspective with this crazy election and all the stuff going on. I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thanks a lot, Art. Talk to you soon.